Good morning, my name's Andrew Belletty, and today I'm in Darwin talking with artist, singer, songwriter, director, producer, mentor, and long-standing friend, Todd Williams. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning, Andrew.
Did I miss anything there?
No, I think you covered it all.
Now, I just want to talk initially about where we are and what it is you're doing here and how that kind of came about, and pretty much kind of big picture stuff.
I have been involved in the VampTV project now for the last 11 years. What VAMP stands for is Video Arts, Music and Performance. It's a project that was developed after the Minister for Education approached the music school as a way to engage Indigenous kids at school because getting bums on seats and keeping kids at school in communities was an issue. There was ways of engaging kids through the sports, through Clontarf, but the education minister approached the school to say, well, how can we engage kids in remote schools through the arts and or through music? And our principal at the time gave him a list of ideas, and he basically chose the VampTV idea. Now, the idea is to create a magazine-style show, which would be a combination of material that we would generate, but also invite schools to send in material to let other schools know what they're doing and to showcase what they're doing in a fun way. And then we'd have hosts and we'd package it all up together and then be able to distribute it via the internet into schools as part of classroom activities. So in a lot of ways, it gave kids an opportunity to see themselves in a really positive light, because at that time, this is before NITV had emerged, at that time there wasn't very much representation of Indigenous people full stop, but particularly Indigenous kids available, so they couldn't really see themselves. So this was a really good feedback loop for Indigenous kids to see themselves and feel positive about who they were and what they were doing, about their culture, about what they were doing at school, and to have a little bit of fun with it.
Okay, so that's it's a lot
to unpack there. Yeah.
It's a lot to unpack, but what I'm seeing is like it goes well beyond kind of diversion. This is, you're getting kids who are still in school or potentially should be in school to be more engaged and more interested in both music, plus also building capacity within communities to produce stuff. And from what I've seen quite a few episodes. Just seeing kids presenting, and to me that's a huge thing, because I've spoken about this before, but shame job is such a big factor here, and just to see what you guys do, which is like when it's being produced by community people within that community, for that community, and to see young kids of school age in front of the camera, and like even if they're doing a little quick Q&A or if they're introducing a bit of sport or music, it's awesome.
Yeah, and shame job is a big kind of cultural thing, and it's something that we try to overcome when the team go into a community. We know that within school that there is a lot of people who are going to waggle their fingers and almost shout at them to behave or to do this. They almost immediately can sense that we're not like that. We're very relaxed. We try to put them at ease and to give them the confidence to be themselves and even rise up and to perform, whether it be on camera or to go and record music and so on.
And whereabouts do you guys reach in the Northern Territory?
Well, the whole of the Northern Territory is our backyard. Initially, we my colleague Rodney Balaam and I, when we started out, we went all over the territory. But now, for the last 4 years, 5 years, we've had a team member based in Alice Springs who services the southern areas, goes out to schools and does stories within schools there. He's just working on a story right now out of Papunya, where part of one of our programs is called Beat School, and that is about encouraging or teaching teachers how to teach beats on iPads, giving them the confidence to engage kids so they can sit there and spend an hour or a classroom hour developing just with their headphones on beats and how to overlay a bass line on that and how that can open up a world because with technology we know that kids just climb into that stuff so quickly and out of that if it all goes well with the teacher and the teacher's really into it, that leads on to lyric writing, which helps with their confidence in English and so on, and literature. They can also then, if it gets to a state where they, and we've got about 5, 6 actual songs which have come out of the Beat School project, which has only been up and running for the last couple of years. And sometimes the school makes a film clip of that. Sometimes we go out and make a film clip with them. The Numbulwar one was fantastic. I'll show you that later. But it is it just seems we're trying to work out appropriate ways to engage or to deliver music education in very remote schools, because the tyranny of distance is a terrible thing. It's very expensive to go out and to send teachers out there specifically for that. So by having the teachers teach beats, they're supported by one of our teachers back here. If they we can go online and they can do a session online and the kids can show our teacher what they're doing and then get encouragement that way and to support the teachers that way.
So you're building capacity at one level, both within the student body or the potential student body, plus also the teachers. And that's an interesting thing. Yeah. And you're also... whenever you're doing things like this, where it's a community, but it's a big community platform, because you're saying NT wide, you're seeing people from all over the NT, and they're seeing themselves, they're seeing others, and that's a really big, not only individual community building thing, but it's a kind of a statewide, it's almost a nation kind of building exercise, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of holistic. And when we started out, we were concerned that kids in, say, Arionga weren't going to be really necessarily interested in what kids were doing in Yirrkala, but that's not the case. They love seeing kids do, seeing their life and seeing what they're going through, and it's educative in that sense, because otherwise they may not ever see what each others are doing and what various schools and their programs are doing across the territory. And that's also inspirational for teachers to go, oh, I like that idea, I'm going to do that with my kids. And that's really kind of sharing knowledge, sharing inspiration, and sharing role models and so on.
And the capacity building, the visibility that you were talking about before, just the thing of seeing Aboriginal children on screen, but on a regular basis and from a diverse, set of communities, that must be really empowering. I mean, have you seen kids that you've started with and that have now gone through some path and become a performer or a dancer, or they've joined somebody? Or
well, I can give you 2 cracker examples. There is a young fella that we met in right at the beginning of the project, who's hanging around our mobile studio at Gama. playing guitar, and he was in a local band. He was only 15 at the time. He was working with his good friend Theo Di Matteo, and they went through various bands. We also caught up with him at the Battle of the School Bands. We have this program that's been ongoing since I think about 2011, and they entered the Battle of the School Band as the Neil Boys, Northeast Arnhem lads, and they then became the Seven Star Band. They went through. Now their latest gig is King Stingray. They're the two frontmen of King Stingray, and Yidinga started off as a drummer. And gravitated to writing his own songs, then being the front man occasionally for Youth Indie. Now he's the front man for the Youth Indie project full time, and being the front man for King Stingray. So we've seen his journey from a kind of shy, skinny little boy to national and soon to be international success of King Stingray. And he is, they won Battle of the School Bands, so they got to perform at Bass in the Grass, a major music event up here. So that was a mind-blowing experience for them, and gave them a taste of what it was like to have big production and so on. And so that is a really good example of how through VAMP and through our programs here at the NT Music School has gone on to bigger things. The other example, which only came up last year, again through Battle of the School Bands, was a very, very small school called Mulgabore, which is just northeast of Alice Springs. You're nodding your head, you know the story. Mulgabore saw Battle of the School Bands being advertised and saying, get your entry in if you want to be part of this. They didn't have a band at that stage. His bass player had never picked up a bass, but they entered the Battle of the School Bands and the heat in Alice Springs, blew everyone away at Alice Springs. And for those who don't know, they were very, very influenced by their parents' taste in music, being Kedss and Status Quo and those 70s bands, to the point where they performed with Kiss-like makeup in school colours on their face when they performed. So not only did they win the heat, they went on to win the Battle of the School Bands last year. They were invited to play at the Beat Festival in Darwin, so they came up and played 3 nights there. 2 nights, because on the third night they had to fly down to the Gold Coast to support Kiss.
No.
They got the opportunity to play with Kiss and to meet their heroes, and at the Gold Coast, and that just was totally mind blowing for them. So within 6 months of them deciding to enter the school bands, they are on stage with Kiss. One thing I will say is Alvin, who is the front man and the songwriter he is an amazing musician. He's only 17, 18. He's still at school now, and he has coalesced the band into a very, very powerful rock unit. They recently used their prize from Battle of the School Bands to record a new song called Fame Not Shame, which ties into that.
Love it.
That ties into that shame job and overcoming that factor. And it's and our colleague in Alice Springs, Stuart Liddell, did a film clip for them, and we put it on the last episode of VampTV, and it's a cracker. It's absolutely a ball terror. So they are really, really good band, and they're still at school. But since last year, they've been invited to perform the Tiwi Islands, in Melbourne. I think they went down to Sydney as well, and a lot of those images from their performing are in the latest clip. You'll see it's like the adventures of the Mulgabore Hard Rock Band. So that was enormously satisfying to see that journey. It has to be said there, it's a tiny school. There's one teacher and everyone in the band's related. The community itself is maybe 50 people. And the whole community got behind the school. The principal or the teacher, Peshala, a Kiwi lady who just really, really got behind Alvin and the rest of the band to further themselves, supported the band to go to Alice Springs in that first instance. And she certainly has recognised how music really engaged the kids. And is able to teach other things in the curriculum about how much their instruments cost and how they're going to afford this, and the logistics, and how being in a band actually has a flow-on effect to other parts of the curriculum. And so that's a huge success story. Look out for Mugglebore Hard Rock and Alvin in particular, because they're going to be huge.
Yeah, I've seen the clip, and I totally agree. I can't believe that they weren't actually a band.
No, before last year, yeah.
That is absolutely crazy, because they're so confident and competent, and I think that's you couldn't epitomise the work that you guys are doing more than something, like presenting the possibility, presenting the kind of aspiration.
It's like pathways. We would like to kind of think of it as pathways, and not everything that we do is going to resonate with a lot of kids. We like to think of it as light bulb moments that someone's sitting there going, I could do that. And seeing themselves, and as my colleague Courtney says, if you can see it, you can be it. And so representation is really, really vital and important for kids to see people like themselves up there and doing it. And there's, ever since the days, the breakthroughs of bands like Warumpi Band and Yothu Indi, Indigenous representation in music and so on has gone from leaps and bounds, and you've got people like Baker Boy from Milingimbi who has come to the fore. He's got his own success story, and it's just amazing to see. And there were so many incredible First Nations performers that are making their way in the world, singing in language, rapping in language is it's really bringing home to people outside the Northern Territory in particular, because we know how many communities English is a second, third, fourth language down the list of what they can speak. And for the wider Australian community, still, I don't think have twigged that Aboriginal people still speak their language, and to see people like Baker Boy bringing that to the fore and proudly singing in language, it's just a really, really important step forward in acknowledgement of the power of Indigenous music and language in our country.
There still seems to be an over-representation of bands in the Northern Territory. Just on the average weekend, there's a stack of original bands playing in such a small town. To hear that there's 3 bands here, there's 6 bands there's another act on this night. They're all original bands, and they're all playing as we speak. But you're talking hundreds of bands, aren't you? I mean,
yeah. Every community. You go to say the Barunga Festival that's held in June every year, and the Saturday night. There's ostensibly a list of you've got 6 bands, but then it blows out to 10 bands because we want to get up and do some songs too, and it goes on till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and the power and the strength of community bands, because they're family. There's such a strong connection within music and families. I kind of point to someone like the Largemanu Teenage Band when they started off in the.
They were teenagers.
They were teenagers. Now the Largemanu middle-aged men, but. In that band now, they've got their sons and their nephews and stuff in the band, learning keyboards and so on. And and the older people are really encouraging passing on those skills and that knowledge and that confidence to make original music. And that's just, awesome.
It's one of those scenes that I think when you're inside of it, you don't fully appreciate how rich, diverse, and as I said, how overrepresented musicians and bands are in the top end. Because in New South Wales, for example, the amount of actual bands playing it's just plummeting to record lows. Your lack of venues and all sorts of issues are affecting that. But there's not a lot of live music, and up here it does still appear that there's lots, and that's an incredible thing. And it's, to me, to get young people, and what the project that this is a part of is focusing on 12 to 25-year-olds who are disengaged, or at some level they're kind of still finding their way. And this type of activity, it's beyond diversion. It's community building, it's capacity building, it's aspirational.
It's culture too. It's we both you and I were there when we saw that crossover with Youth Indie, bringing Yolngu culture, a Manukay language within a rock context. That was very, very new in the 80s. I mean, I think the very first song to be rock song to be sung was Out of Jailer by Rumpy Band back in the day, and now we're just kind of seeing such confidence and strength right across the board. Yeah.
So I want to just reach back into the past now. So you've been doing this for the VampTV thing for how long?
Since 2011. Yeah, we're on our 169th episode. Each episode's half an hour long, and it's a magazine style. We've got hosts, and we keep it moving along. We don't have too many talking heads. We try to make it very visual, and as much as we are very conscious of the fact that, again, ESL, we try and let even if you don't know English, you'd probably understand what's going on because it's all being told in a visual way, and there's lots of music in it.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important.
When I first met you in 1983, sometime around then, you were a visual artist, a photographer.
I was doing uni. Yeah, I was doing my fine arts degree. Yeah.
And that was, you were doing kind of visual art stuff. And I had no idea that you were also a songwriter, and
I had no idea either.
And a photographer, because you were
I was majoring in photography. Yeah.
In those days, one of the few people who had cameras and the ability to develop the film and to buy the film and all that. It just wasn't.
Well, I started I got enrolled in 3 different university courses. They're all kind of science-based, and then decided to go with fine arts, almost not out of desperation, but I really had an interest in fine arts, and as anyone who's done a fine arts course, it just changed my world and the way that I look at the world, and especially when I started doing photography, you start to almost frame images just by looking around. You start to look at the world very, very differently. My brother and I were always very, very interested in music. My brother Cal, who ended up being the guitarist in Youth Indie and the Swamp Jockeys. So we always were engaged in music, and my brother used to live in a block down at Humpty Doo, where we used to go down there and just jam and muck around, and we were big Johnny Cash fans, and sing a lot of songs together. Not only visually but with sound and so on. We were doing radio at the time as well, and that really kind of fed our interest in music and what was happening, and listening to bands like the Gun Club and the Beast Suburban and so on, and the Violent Femmes. They were really, really instrumental in stoking our interest in music. And when we did form a band, that's where our touchstones were, as well as kind of wanting to make it very, very particular top-end Northern Territory sound, if you could put it that way. It was kind of a mixture of all those things, and the bands are funny things. With the chemistry within a band, all the different members bring a different thing, a different element to it, and if it works, it works, and you have one member drop out and suddenly it doesn't work anymore. So over that time when we joined the Swamp Jockeys, and we had those 4 or 5 years of throwing ourselves at the world, we were very ambitious. We wanted to take ourselves we did very well up here. We actually we had a lot of followers who came to our gigs regularly and did some wild dancing, and some of the best memories of my life is being at the at Lim's Hotel in that room, and from the stage all the way back to the bar was just absolutely packed. Everyone was dancing. The Irish have got the expression, the clake, and the clake's in the room. Everyone's got a big dopey smile on their face, and we're all in that whole vibe together. And that, if you can get to that stage, that's just enormous. So, we made contact during that Black Fella, White Fella tour with Midnight Oil. Two of our manager and our other lead singer were pilots, and they flew Midnight Oil on the top end of that Black Fella, White Fella tour, and we got to know Gary Morris and the Oils guys. And so when we went down to Sydney, they gave us the opportunity to not only play with them, but bands like Spy vs. Spy, even Jimmy Barnes. And so we had a lot of great opportunities, and in the end we ended up touring with Midnight Oil for 6 weeks on a major tour, and that was enormously educative as far as going to the next level was concerned. One of the things I will say from a fine arts point of view, and how that kind of crossed over to what we were doing, I learned how to screen print at Fine Arts, and so we developed our own promotional materials, our posters, our T-shirts. We printed them ourselves. We had control over that. We were very, very excited to be able to do that, to establish our own personality, running around Sydney in the middle of the night, putting up posters for illegal gigs that we put on at the warehouse. That kind of flows through. It was to be able to contribute not only musically but visually to how a band's perceived, and was very, very important to us.
I think, there's a lot to unpack there, but a couple of things is, you're talking about the Limbs gigs, which were kind of, for Darwin people at the time, they were like they were the holy grail of gigs, because they were played in a cage in a barbed wire enclosure. And that started on a Sunday afternoon at around 1 o'clock and finished around 6 or 6:30 in the evening. So it was an afternoon gig, which you can imagine in a venue that had a tin roof and, like a basketball court mesh on the sides. Concrete floor. Capacity probably about 500-600. I think the some of those shows that we played there, we got above 1,200 people, and I remember one particular day, it was getting towards the wet season, probably October. That was kind of one of the end gigs, and it was, not only was it packed, but it was so packed and so sweaty that it was raining inside. We had created a weather system in Limbs. So there was this kind of microclimate going on. So the connection that you're talking about is not only the kind of vibrations of the music and the bodies within the room, but it was kind of interacting with the climate and with everything else.
And we were a very performative band. Both Michael and myself, as frontmen, really wanted to show people how to engage with the music. We just danced and danced, and I waved my arms around and shouted a lot. Michael spun around doing the goanna, and we liked putting on a show. And I think that was an important part of our success in that. we really wanted to show people how to enjoy our music because we were enjoying it ourselves. And in fact, my wife saw me perform before she even met me, and she loved my smile and wanted to meet me. And so, out of that, I got my wife of 35 years. Yeah. It's it was a really, really important time. And the 80s was nationally a really, really big time for pub music, and the audiences there were there for us if we were good enough. And right across Australia, the pub scenes were just pumping with the amazing bands that came out during the 80s.
Now, can I get back to another thing you talked about, and it's right on topic. So we were then talking about a gig in a pub, which in a town that when we first started playing, the hoteliers and the people who managed bars like Limbs or the Vic or the Nightcliff Hotel or whatever, they would not entertain the idea of a band that played original music.
Very resistant.
Yeah,
very resistant.
As in, no, you can't play here.
Yeah.
So for years, I think, and even at the point where we had, such a proven following. I mean, we played on the roof of the Workers' Club for, May Day, and there was thousands and thousands of people, and I think that's what
behind
turned
the Roma
it.
Bar, yeah.
Yeah, so I think those huge crowds finally turned the pubs towards a band that played original music. But before that, it was absolutely a no. So we existed outside, like a kind of vernacular music venues, and we were making stuff up. Booking a Scout Hall, booking a Greek Hall.
If you just go to the Greek Hall, there's this perfect example of that, because that was during the precursor to the Darwin Festival, the Bougainvillea Festival. They said, well, we're going to put on a concert down at the amphitheatre, which was the major gig in town. It's a beautiful venue, natural amphitheatre. It's where all the big bands played, and they basically chose a whole lot of cover bands to play that. So we just reacted against that, and within a week we had organised several bands to play at the Greek Hall, which was just a big hall in Darwin, and with all original bands, and we packed out the place, and we called it Dance in Hell. I've still got a poster of it somewhere, and it was look, you made your own luck, but I do have to kind of give credit to with bands to get ahead. They do need an outside. You need your own sound guy for a start, or person, sound woman, sound guy, and you need a manager. And we had a very savvy manager who was just as ambitious as us, and ended up being he was the manager of Youth the Indie, and who ended up taking them all around the world. Alan James is his name, and I do lay a lot of credit at his feet, because he was very important in our development, and kicking us up the arse and making things happen. And as he was definitely the sixth member. Yeah, absolutely.
And just thinking back to the Greek Hall, which is another kind of literally just a big barn with a wooden floor, and that was just one of those overly crowded gigs, and it was kind of thumbing our nose at an established festival which should have supported us, and so profoundly rebuffed our advances, just said absolutely no. And we, at that time, we were getting that from every single avenue. So the reason why I painted up my van, remember, it had in red house paint, Dance in Hell written across the side of the van. We parked it on street corners and left it there all day. We printed posters.
We hand painted a big banner outside the Greek Hall, and the night before the gig, someone set fire to it. And we thought, we said, well, it was Satan just reaching up and says, I want that banner for myself, thank you.
But it was just like a reaction to it was a small town at the time, probably only 60,000 people, maybe, Darwin, and to be kind of still after proving yourself, we had proven ability to draw a very big crowd. So there was no actual reason to stop us. But it seemed like at the time every single avenue was shut to us. So we reached out to make our own, the Allawa Scout Hall. But we also just want to get on the idea of how we were all politically motivated at the time too, which was kind of, not only, getting Indigenous bands up on stage, in avenues and at occasions when that was never really done, but also, like supporting East Timor at a pivotal time in the mid 80s, and holding gigs where we, kind of said, well, so is there anybody who wants to come up on stage, and getting people doing traditional stuff outside Brown Smart. The unions loved us every May Day, on the rooftop. We brought the house down. Again, one of those memorable gigs where thousands and thousands of people. So there were all these kind of, fairly vernacular spaces that we inhabited and made a success of them, whether it was somebody's lounge room that we almost destroyed the entire house. But these other spaces were really interesting because they were kind of political, or, as I said, the bikies or the doctors or whatever. They were really interesting spaces, and somehow we made them into something. So it was like the mainstream venues and festivals and all that didn't want anything to do with us, but all this kind of vernacular stuff was opening up, and we made it open up.
Yeah, activated a whole lot of different spaces. We played that nurses gig out at the hospital, just on a stage out at the back of near the generators and so on. Our ethos. I mentioned the term wild dancing. I used to put wild dancing on all the posters. It's like, we want people just to let themselves go, not to be cool, but just to let themselves go, dance like no one's watching, because that's what we did on stage. We wanted everyone to say, come on down, let's just go off our heads. And that was a really good thing. I still believe in that myself. I get frustrated with bands who just don't engage. Just go, come on.
And we play. Was it Gino and Lynn's Going Away gig
at the behind the Roma bar?
In the car park.
In the car park.
I don't think anybody knew that car park was there.
Yeah, no.
It was behind the photo
shop,
mural of the palm trees, and there was suddenly a door opened up, and we went, "What the hell's that?" So we knew we couldn't play inside the Roma bar, which was our favourite cafe at the time. But the disused car park, for want of a better word.
Activating spaces, and we were good at putting on shows, and that required a whole lot of logistics and risk as well, quite often, and we didn't make money out of it. Money wasn't really the driving reason for what we were doing. We were just really enjoying what we were doing, and developing our skills, and trying to get better.
Though the money would have been nice.
Money would have been nice, yeah. I think we learned a lot. I mean, our bass player now is managing his son's band, King Stingray, and through, I think, Stuart's experience with the Swamp Jockeys and Youth the Indie, because he was the bass player in Youth the Indie, he makes sure with King Stingray that not only do they get paid well and control their recordings and so on, but he knocks back so much work now because he's just concerned. He doesn't want to fry the band. He just wants to make sure that the band have got enough time to decompress, and especially for the younger members of the band who are really connected to country, to allow them just to go, yep, I'm going to go back to Yirrakala now and just chill out. Stewie's telling me that they knock back tens of thousands of dollars just to say, well, no. So that was and I'm really so happy for not only Stewie but for Roy and Dimateo and Yettinger and the rest of the band to have the success that they're having, but doing it on their own terms.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what was that, 40 years ago or something, that the time that we're talking about? So
it's a while ago.
In some strange kind of extrapolation, it's an ongoing kind of thing from both the original members of Fiothu and the original kind of Swamp Jockeys. So it's an interesting kind of combination of those two things. So I think what, to me, I didn't fully appreciate at the time was what was happening with those lyrics. And I kind of understood that the music was a product of the environment in many ways. It was hot. We used to rehearse outdoors because we had to play in blinding, stifling conditions. And,
sweaty.
Yeah, motivating people meant because people just in the afternoon or the early evening, they didn't want to dance. They wanted to sit back and drink beer.
Yeah.
But when you look out and you see 1,200 people sweating and dancing, you realise that the environment, the climate, the weather, the people, the types of people who are there, regular people, but somehow we had to provide them with something that was going to make them dance. Yeah. And that was, I think, one of the keys.
Yeah, the sound that we came up with is a kind of combination of country and rock and in loose terms swamp, but there's also reggae thrown in there. So it was a bit of a melange of things. And Michael was a good songwriter. Cal and I worked on tracks together. Stewie and I worked on tracks together. Yeah, that was kind of really, really interesting. We wrote a song about being hit by a cyclone and the build up to that, and the actual cyclone, when Cal would do this amazing guitar solo and just create these whale noises which felt like you were inside the tumult of an actual cyclone, and then it would die down and it was like the aftermath, and then we sang a verse about the aftermath. And that, to write about things which are particular to your place, did resonate a lot because people recognised it and they owned it and they identified. So yeah, I know that. It's a bit like Skyhooks talking about their life in Melbourne at the time, and that was that hadn't been done before. Like, what do you mean you can write songs about your own life? What? And so there was. We were mad keen on getting people on the dance floor because that's a party, and. If you can combine, like Midnight Oil so successfully did, getting people just to rock out to really important messages. Every time they played Power and the Passion. When we went on that tour, I saw that song every night for 6 weeks, and never failed to just be moved by how much people engaged with that, and that was just so powerful.
I'm just thinking, back to the actual recording and how difficult it was for us to do this recording, because, I mean, in those days, there was Rod Louis Gung, wasn't it, his studio?
Yeah, that was it. And when we recorded Mango Dingo, that first set of recordings, it was still being built around us. It hadn't been finished.
It wasn't finished. It was a 16 track that he had, I think.
Yeah,
so
and that was like, woo.
That was a pretty big deal, and it was a quarter-inch or 1-inch or half-inch machine. It wasn't the best.
It was a terrible studio, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and there was a lot of noise on the tracks.
And the drum sound,
awful. Cardboard boxes.
Cardboard box, yes.
But yeah, so the conditions that we recorded under, but I don't think we had much or any money. I'm not even sure how much we raised.
We had a bit of band money, and that was about it.
Even now, when I talk to Stuart Kellaway, who manages King Stingray, just the cost of getting a single artist from Nhulunbuy Airport to Sydney Airport is at times $4,000 to $5,000 return, which is just extraordinary. That's one person.
No, it was, like all young bands, our first recordings.
We had no idea.
Yeah, we had no idea. And we had for a producer, a music journalist who had no idea either to get the best sounds. We had an engineer who was just still building his studio, and we probably didn't have the mics. We didn't have the wherewithal, and I was a pretty useless singer back in those days, and still not great shakes now. But we were really quite nascent, and demos and so on. We had the Tascam 4-track, and literally 4 tracks to work with.
On cassette.
On cassette. And if you wanted more, you had to bounce stuff, and once you bounced it, it was unmixable and so on. So it was great for putting down songs immediately, and in some ways I still love those earlier recordings better than the ones that ended up being the so-called better recordings, because they had such a lovely homespun feel. The immediacy you can pick up from those early Tascam recordings was just really lovely. But it's humbling, and you've got to go through the really, really tough times to get to the good times. And if you don't have the tough times, then you're missing out, because it really helps galvanise your sound and your determination to go, well, this is the low point. Anywhere is up from here.
But I just want to say, and I really look forward to working with you on the Knock 'em Down sound system project in April 2024.
No worries. It was very, very exciting. Absolutely. I'm here.